Zaki his son as your host on this most epic journey through pop culture's past. Hold on to your butts. This is Nostalgia Theater.
Brought to you by the Movie Film Podcast.
Hi, everybody. This is Zaki, and welcome back to the Nostalgia Theater Podcast. I know it's been a minute since I've dropped a new episode of this show, but 2026 is a big one for me because it marks exactly a decade since I first launched this show, and I couldn't very well miss that milestone. So it was my mission at the start of this year to make sure that I was dropping regular episodes here, and so I'm hoping that this episode right here marks a triumphant return, and we'll be seeing a whole bunch of new shows throughout this year. With that in mind, I think this is a good one to come back with. This is my interview with Kenneth Johnson. He is one of the most iconic and important creators, certainly of my lifetime. When I look at his output and the way it informed my worldview, it's sizable, his impact. He created television's Incredible Hulk. He created the sci-fi miniseries V. So basically the entire franchise that came along with that, although he was responsible primarily for the original miniseries. He also created Fox's TV adaptation of the movie Alien Nation. He also directed a little movie called Short Circuit 2, which is a clear favorite of my buddy Brian Hall, who I, of course, co-host the Movie Film Podcast with. So this is my chat with him from a couple years back. I had to set it aside shortly after we had our conversation because I needed to edit it and do a little work on the sound mix. And then, you know, what tends to happen, things pile up. Your little Jenga tower of stuff you have to do gets a little overwhelming, and then you forget what's in the tower. And frankly, what happened is I had misplaced the elements of this interview, and recently I was able to locate them and put them together, and I think you'll be surprised at how timely and relevant it all remains. So, not going to waste any more time. Here it is, my extended interview with Kenneth Johnson. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I have been a fan of yours literally all my life because I've been watching The Incredible Hulk since practically the cradle.
Oh my gosh, you poor tortured child.
One of the most distinctive memories of my childhood is seeing David Banner's eyes turn white and then me running into the other room.
Yes, it's when we were filming the pilot, and we were in the middle of. We were doing a scene up at California Institute of the Arts, which is where we filmed some of the laboratory sequences and stuff, just north of L.A. And I had heard from the makeup department that the white eyes had come in. And from the doctor that was making them, and I said to Bill, I said, Bix, why don't you go put them on and see how they feel, you know? And so he walked away, and I'm busy, getting the setup and lining it up and everything. And about 10 minutes later, I hear, "Hey, Kenny," and I turn around, and walking up the hallway toward me is big television star Bill Bixby with this big grin on his face and these white eyes, and I said, "Son of a bitch, this show is a hit." And that was the very first time he had them on. That's one of my favorite pictures of Bix and me is standing there with him grinning and me right beside him. And it was. Yeah, well, I wanted a trigger mechanism. I wanted something that would. We knew we were past the point of no return, and that was a chilling kind of thing, and at the same time gave me the opportunity not to have to show every single Hulk out in its entirety. The eyes could turn white, he could get thrown into a closet, and we knew who was coming out.
Yeah.
So
it's the effect, and then Joe Harnell's music. I mean, it was Pavlovian.
Yeah, it was. It really was. We stole a little bit from Ligeti, the composer who Stanley Kubrick famously used as the people are discovering the monolith on the moon, and the apes before them. So it was that kind of chilling quality. Unfortunately, when you're doing an episodic television show, you can't afford to pay 8 singers every time, and when you're singers are SAG players, so they get paid just like any of the guest stars on the show would have gotten paid, and we just didn't have any money, so we had to go to make it more electronic. But it still was very effective, and people still comment about it today. It's good,
and while we were talking about the music, I wanted to ask about the Lonely Man music. I find it fascinating how much iconic resonance that music still carries to this day, where you can hear it and feel sad. And
yeah. No, it's true. I mean, you've probably seen the Family Guy take on it.
Yes, that's right. The sad walking away music.
That's right, and it was an important element from the very beginning. I mean, Joe and I had been working together since I had brought him to the Mike Douglas show when I was executive producer of that back in Philadelphia in the late '60s. He'd been a studio musician in New York and really, really gifted, and also had a couple of he had a big platinum record on "Fly Me to the Moon" back in those days, and I brought him out to do the music on the $6 Million Man, the Bionic Woman, and so naturally I carried him along with me into the Hulk. And Joe was trained classically, and I loved Joe. I took piano for 7 years, long enough to discover that as a pianist I was a really good drummer, and Joe always used to say that I knew just enough about music to be dangerous, and when we talked about the theme that I wanted, I said, look, I wanted to be poignant but not sappy and soapy, and I sat at his piano right beside him for a long time when he was working on it, and we're trying to find exactly the right thing, and I think finally we got down to the final point where I said, that's pretty good, but how about this note instead of this note, and that's the way it ended up. And so it was, and you're right, it really hits people viscerally and takes them back to all of those feelings that Bix was able to capture so beautifully, and the essence of what I was looking to try to do in the series.
I mean, just to put this in perspective, my youngest son, he's 4.5, and he'll be walking around the house and he'll go dun 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 dun. And I said, what are you doing? He says, Papa, Hulk. And so 40 years later, here we are.
That's right. It's amazing. I mean, and to me, it's like an eye blink. It seems like yesterday because I still have Arrested Development at about age 19, and I never have gotten past it. But
just getting right into it. I was watching the news yesterday, and here's a story about how 43% of Republican voters say that they would be happy if Donald Trump personally decided to shut down the media that he disagrees with. And I said, my gosh, this could be Richard Hurd on TV saying he'll protect us from the scientists. And I thought, right. I mean, we are living in V, and I've used so many V metaphors. One thing I've said over the past couple of years is the one thing V got wrong is that the aliens pretended to be lovely, and they had to disguise the fact that they were horrible lizard people. And I feel like what we're at now is people are like, no, we're the lizard people, and we're coming after you. And people are like, all right, cool.
Right. Well, it's true. The beauty of the great beauty of V, I think, is that it's and you've maybe heard me say this, it's really Spartacus and the revolt of the slaves. It's really the American Revolution. It's really apartheid. It's really any time one people are oppressed by an uber power that rolls in, the Spaniards over the Native Americans, etc., or the Western Europeans over the Native Americans. But no, it's a timeless story. And as I was saying, I even moved one of the characters from the original V when I was writing the script for the remake feature that we're trying to desperately get off the ground.
Yeah.
I said, I really need a Native American in here, and so I changed one of the characters to Native American, and it plays so great all the way through, because at the end when they're beginning to, and he's part of the resistance, and they're beginning to try to fight back, and somebody says, "Yeah, man, we got to stop this occupation," and the Native American looks at him and said, "Yeah, I'm with you, man. My country's been occupied since 1492." And certainly the stuff that's going on, and I saw that chilling thing too about let's give the president the ability to just cancel any news people he doesn't like. It's a scary time, and it's funny because it was so obvious when I was writing the original V that, well, how do you do this if you're an alien force coming in, and I realized, of course, well, it's communication.
Yeah.
It all has to do with communication, because as soon as you screw up communication, then you're really screwed up, and then you can take control. And so it was an obvious thing to do, and many of the critics back in 1983 commented on that specifically too, about the power of the media and the power of the people who control the media if they are not the right people, so, or even if they are the right people, who knows whether they're the right people or not. The First Amendment was a brilliant stroke by the founding fathers, and they made a lot of mistakes, but that was one that they really got right.
Yeah.
So no, it's never gone away, and you're right about Richard Hurd, and the one thing I'm looking to do in the new one, though, as I went back and looked at the original, I'm not trying to, I didn't want to reimagine it. I hate that word, because I've seen what people have tried to reimagine the Incredible Hulk and the Bionic Woman, and oh my God, and V, yes, and what disasters each and every time, And so I really wanted to stick with all the stuff all the good reasons that V was so successful to begin with, and and it was pointed out to me too recently, and I hadn't really realized it, that V is the highest rated work of science fiction in the history of television.
Amazing.
And I mean, certainly Star Trek and things like that had longer runs and like that, but nobody comes close to V in terms of the initial impact and the initial ratings, and which is pretty cool. So, I didn't want to try to reinvent the wheel, Zaki. It was very important to me to try to keep true to what I had done originally, and at the same time bring it, of course, up into the 21st century, and that's part of what I'm intending to do. But the other thing too is I realized is they could have been even more clever and more devious than they were the first time, because and even the music. I mean, the first time we see that ship, in the middle of that firefight in Ecuador with Mike Donovan spots the big ship coming in, and I said, Joe, let's use the Fifth Symphony, which we did, and twisted it around a little bit. But it was ponderous. It was like scary. It was like dark. This was like bad shit, And I mean, and then you saw it rolling past the skull and the ground, and and it was obviously very, very sort of on the nose, portentous.
Yes.
And my thinking this time out is to be a little more subtle about it, is to have the music when we first see the ship be a little worrisome, but at the same time have a twinkle to it and have a sparkle to it, and so that it's like it's wow, this is like with the way that David Packard played it in playing Daniel, when he sees it and he says it's awesome, and while everybody else is terrified, but he's already into awesome, And so I wanted to go a little bit more toward awesome in the new incarnation of it, so that they're really, really smarter, than and it'll and at the same time, I want to make sure that the the problem with people trying to reimagine it in a different direction, all of my shows, is that the audience who remembers the originals for a reason, and it gave them certain feelings at the time. And I want to make sure that I satisfy the fans, but at the same time surprise them, and just take it into some different directions, but still it's what you tuned in to see. So even some of the dialogue is still the same in the new script. But the bottom line is that the core essence of it, Zaki, is true to what I originally started out to do.
As it happens, I was discussing V in my class earlier this week. I used specifically the examples of Roots and V, two very different miniseries that both, they were like they hit the landscape like a meteor.
Yeah, it really was intriguing. And you may know the origin of V. I had read Sinclair Lewis's novel, 1935 novel, It Can't Happen Here. I've been a big fan of Sinclair Lewis's writing a lot, but I had not run across that one until the early '80s, and it was about a rise of fascism happening in America the way that it was happening in Italy and Germany at that time in the '30s, and I thought, wow, that's really an interesting concept. And I survived the Nixon years, and I was even offered a job in the White House by Nixon at one point.
Wow.
And said, gee, no, thank you. But and I watched him arresting students and people in the streets and holding them with no charge back in the early 70s, and it creeped me out at the time. And what Sinclair Lewis had posited was a grassroots growth of fascism, and suddenly the country being a different country. And I sought a way to try to do that in the contemporary America, and using the media and all of that sort of thing. And that's how V really began. It didn't have any aliens or spacecraft or anything in it like that to begin with at all. It was a story about power and about how people suck up to power, like the Vichy French, or how they just try to keep their heads down and hope that they won't get picked at. And then the third group of people, of course, are the heroes who say, no, wait a minute, this is bullshit, this is wrong, we got to fight against it. And they become the heroes of the resistance. And I wanted to create a real homogeneous kind of group of characters, a spectrum, that's the word I was looking for, big-time writer, a spectrum of characters, so that everybody in the audience, young and old and various races and everything, would each have the ability to say, oh, I think I'm like that one, or I think I'm like this one, or, oh, God, I hope I wouldn't be like that one, but I might be, and that's what I was striving to do. And I realized when the suggestion was made that the problem that Brandon Tartikoff, who's a good friend, and he'd asked me what I was doing, and I was writing the script at the time, and he said, oh, I want to read it. And I said, no, Brandon, this was not for television. This is a feature, but he read it and really just flipped out for it, but was concerned. His only concern was two things: that Americans wouldn't get fascism. And I said, no, it's not a complicated concept. All you have to do is put on a black shirt, shave your head, and beat somebody up, But he said, couldn't it be an outside force like the Chinese, or in those days the Soviets? And I just didn't think that they could sustain a really extended occupation of the U.S. And then Vice President Jeff Sagansky, young guy out of Harvard MBA and Harvard Law School, was sitting in the corner at the time. Jeff went on, incidentally, to run TriStar Pictures and to run CBS and to, a lot of stuff. But he was just the kid in the corner of the room, and he said, "How about aliens, Kenny?" And I said, "Oh, Jeff, God, no," because because I was trained in the classical theater, Zaki, at what was then Carnegie Tech, the drama department. It's now Carnegie Mellon University, but it was a was and still is one of the most renowned theater schools in the country. No film, no TV, but theater. And I had always envisioned a more eclectic career. But you work on the $6 Million Man, you create the Bionic Woman, you do the Incredible Hulk, and pretty soon the pigeonhole begins to narrow for you in Hollywood. And so I just didn't want to do that kind of larger than life alien thing.
Yeah.
But and I was very vocal about it. No. And Brandon said, okay, well, just think about it. Just an idea. So I went home and thought about it, and I realized that it's a really good idea because I could still tell the exact same story that I had set out to tell, which was about power, and thematically stick to that and make a thought-provoking drama out of it. But I'd also have all the visual eye candy that would draw in a larger audience, and so I agreed to it, and it worked out pretty well.
Well, with that in mind, I think, and this is not meant to be a critique of the recent the remake series, but I do feel like what was so important, and this is my perspective as an audience, I mean, feel free to correct me, but what was so important that got lost is that this is not a body snatcher's infiltration story. This is fascism, and this is it's about fascism and collaboration. And
yeah, exactly. It's about occupation.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons that I turned down all the big money that was offered to me by the studios when they discovered that I had the motion picture rights, and suddenly I had a lot of new best friends, and who offered me just truckloads of money, and but I feared losing creative control of it because they kept thinking Independence Day. They kept thinking
Yes.
Bruckheimer and Michael Bay, and I said, no, guys, this is not an invasion picture. It's a picture about occupation.
Yeah.
It's a picture about not being able to trust the person you're sleeping with or your child because of the dangers and suspense and tensions that an occupation creates. The other thing was that for all of the popularity and the critical acclaim and the astonishing viewership, not only here but around the world, the one person that wasn't really ever happy with the original V was me.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't have the time, I didn't have the money, even though it was the most expensive miniseries at that point that had been made. But the time was crazy too short, and to get it the way that I wanted. But the main thing I didn't have, Zaki, were the tools to make it look the way that I saw it in my head. Because I was working with the same guys that Stephen and George use in their big movies, the same teams, the same crews, the same visual effects people, but we were all working with rubber masks and motion control, and no, you can't move the camera while the ship's got to fly through. You can't pan with it. It's like, oh my God, it was a nightmare. And now there's a couple of visual effects in the original V that cost about $80,000 for about 20 seconds of film that you could do on your cell phone today. And I'm not exaggerating, and it would look better than what I did then. And I knew that was going to be eventually the case, and it was so frustrating not to have it. And now one of the things that really is exciting about the movie version is that I can really make it look great, and actually probably for less money in some regards.
Oh, sure,
than it cost then, but really be able to get my vision of the whole thing on the screen.
Well, I was wondering if you could talk about leaving the second miniseries, because this is your baby, and that's a statement when you say, you know what, I'm not going to be involved in this.
It was very frustrating, and I can, in a very, the shortest possible version, because it's a long version. The bottom line was that Brandon wanted it to go on as an independent. The idea was to do a 4-hour miniseries that was essentially a pilot for an ongoing series. But in doing the pilot, we discovered that it was just going to be too expensive, and NBC could not afford to do it as a 1-hour. Brandon said, let's do a 6-hour sequel. Warner said, no, we don't want to be in that business. And Brandon said, okay, how about, would you do a 6-hour sequel if I gave you an additional blind, on-the-air series commitment for an entirely different show that Kenny would create? So a whole another show in in exchange for doing the miniseries. And Warner said, okay, and I said, sure, because I just wanted to get back on the set and do the sequel.
Yeah.
And then I sat down with the summer of '83 with Craig Buck and Peggy Goldman and Diane Froloff, and the four of us crafted a script that was in many ways, I think, better than my original 4-hour had been, or at least took it into different places than I had been able to. And it was a really, really, really cool script. But Warner's was concerned that I wouldn't, and we were ready to go into production, and Warner's was concerned that I wouldn't do it, this is a quote, as quick and cheap and dirty as they wanted it.
Wow.
I said, oh, well, okay, you're probably right. And they said, okay, but I said, except that I have a contract here that says I can direct whatever I want of it, And they said, yeah, well, forget that contract. And I said, oh, okay, I will. And I said, I'll just leave. And they said, no, you get to start working on the blind series commitment. And I said, no. And they said, but you can't take that commitment somewhere else to another studio. I said, I know. And they said, but nobody wants that. It's $5-10 million. I said, I don't care. I don't like you guys.
Wow.
So it was totally Warner's fault that it became what it became. I never saw the final battle, only 30 seconds of it once by accident when I was channel surfing, and after I turned it off after 30 seconds. All of my friends had told me, "Don't ever watch it, Kenny," who had worked on it, and
Sure.
crew and cast that were on it. They said, it's not what you guys wrote, and it's different, and it's awful, and don't watch it. And literally, I swear, Zaki, in that 30 seconds that I saw, they made every possible mistake they could have made in 30 seconds. And I said, okay, I get it. I can't look at this. So it was disappointing, and I know there were still a lot of fans who enjoyed it, and certainly it did well in the ratings, not as well as ours did. But as far as the critics were concerned, oh my goodness, it just got lambasted, and it was sad to see and very hard to do. But and aside from that, I mean, in the last year, a couple of years, when the studios were offering me all the money to make it again, but I feared that I was going to lose creative control of it, maybe not end up in the director's chair. And in spite of the fact that they were offering really like mid $7-figure dollars to do it, and my wife Susie really put it in perspective. She said very simply, it says, all you got to think about, would you rather that the movie never got made than got made wrong by the wrong people? And I said, you're right. That's all I need to think about.
It's true.
Yeah, and that's what I did.
My own perspective as far as V is that I entered the franchise sort of backwards in that I saw the final battle first.
Right.
Because I was living in Saudi Arabia at the time, and so they showed it on TV over there. And I was drawn in, but one thing that I came to realize is what I truly loved was the recap before the credits.
Right. Here's the show you should have seen,
It's
kid.
true, and having rewatched both miniseries relatively recently, the first one truly feels timeless, and the second one does feel of the moment.
Exactly. That's what I've heard about it too. So it was, and that's why I'm so eager to jump onto the stage and get the movie made, because it'll give us a chance to really do it right, to really satisfy everything that everybody wanted, and then carry it through to its conclusion. And the sequel has just got so many. The sequels drawn from the book have got so much more wonderful stuff in it that is of the same quality, texture, tradition, and that we had in the original. Be cool.
Well, and with the benefit of perspective, what is the reason it endures? Why does the iconography endure?
Well, because it's a timeless story. It's as simple as that. It really is Spartacus and the revolt of the slaves. It's about any time an uber power comes rolling in and stomps with their jackboots on the throats of the people. There will be some people who will collaborate to aggrandize themselves and ingratiate themselves and monetize themselves. There will be people who are the go along to get along types. If I just keep my head down, if I'm not Jewish, if I'm not a scientist, if I'm not black, if I'm not whatever, they won't bother me. And then there are the people that say, no, this power is being abused, and we got to fight back. And even if we die doing it, we've got to fight back. And they, of course, become the heroes of the resistance. And I was also eager to show that there was a perspective, a spectrum rather, among the visitors as well. Hence the Robert Englund character and the Sarah the Barbara character, who clearly were not in tune with Diana and her approach. And
Frank Ashmore also.
Yeah, exactly. Like they were good Nazis and bad Nazis, So, and I'm eager to explore that some more in some more depth too. But it's a timeless story. That's why it's worth going back to and remaking.
And I mean, at a very young age, my concept of the allure of fascism was shaped by what I saw in V, and it made me aware. It made me want to go back and read about the Holocaust and things like that. So you did, Mr. Johnson, what Rod Serling did, which was to take a truism about human existence and funnel it through a sci-fi prism.
Right. Well, that's what I was, endeavoring to do. And I mean, that's the fun. I mean, I never planned to be the sci-fi guy, Zaki. I had a classic training in the theater at Carnegie Mellon, and it was Shakespeare and Strindberg and and all the classics and all of that stuff. And suddenly, you create the Bionic Woman and you do the Incredible Hulk, and and then pretty soon you're the sci-fi guy. But what I've loved about working in that genre is that it gives you the opportunity to work in allegory. It gives you the opportunity to do pieces that are primal in many ways, like the legends of the Greeks and the Romans and the Hercules and all of those demigod sort of characters, and really get people thinking. At the same time, if you can blend it into the real world and everyday life, and how would I react? That's what I wanted to do when I created V to begin with. I wanted to create a show that everybody in the audience would be able to say, oh, I think I'm that guy, or I think I'm her,
Absolutely.
or God, I hope I wouldn't be like that one, but I might be, you know. And
so
that's,
true.
And that's that kind of ensemble is really intriguing to me too, and a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah, well, and I think just from what you're describing, what occurs to me is that, I make a comparison with something like Red Dawn, for example, and covering certain similar thematic terrain. But I think what allows V to transcend its moment is specifically that choice, is making it a science fiction story and thus more of a metaphor. It's not beholden to the politics of the moment.
No, that's true, and which makes it just all the more timeless and timely too, as we can see now. But I mean, basically, it really is Spartacus and the revolt of the slaves. It's apartheid. It's the American Revolution. It's wherever there is an oppressed people under the thumb or the jackboot of an uber power. It's like the Nazis rolled into the Low Countries and said, "Hi, we're the Nazis, we're the new guys in town, and we're here to protect you from the English. They're going to start mining the channel pretty soon, and you're going to need us Germans." And then pretty soon we saw their darker side, their other face, and I realized, I can really give them another face. And so that the metaphor, continued, but the whole story had really been based on on research that I had done into the resistance in World War II and in France and in the Low Countries, and also, I mean, the whole character that Julie is based on, named for my daughter, but based on a woman named André de Jong, who was a Belgique nurse, young, like in her 19 or 20 years old, and she. One day, once the war had started, one day she walked into Bilbao, Spain, bringing a dozen British flyers that had crashed in France, and that she had spirited out and walked them across the Pyrenees to Bilbao.
Amazing.
And they said, this is what they said. It's amazing. They said, "Can you bring more out?" And she said, "Of course I can." And she became one of the leaders of the resistance. She was even captured a couple of times by the Nazis. The first time they actually let her go because they said, "Well, she's just a girl. She couldn't be helping out very much, you know." And here she was running what was called the Comet Line, because she was so fast at getting these guys out once they had gone down in France. And so I built her character, the character of Julie, around that true story. And of course, old Abraham, who was the survivor of Auschwitz, had his side to tell about how we have to help each other at times like this, and how if somebody had helped us, your mother would still be alive, and and all that sort of thing. So it was, and it really did strike a chord, and I think it will again. The fans are incredible around the world. It's if you go to my website, as a matter of fact, and click on V or V the movie, and you can see a piece of graffiti art, the billboard size, that appeared on a wall in a college parking lot in Avignon, France, last fall, which is the visitor leader as Donald Trump.
Wow.
And it's amazing. And then somebody just sent me another one yesterday that it's great. They took, in the original V, we had those propaganda posters, the visitors, your friends, that kind of thing, and a handsome guy reaching his hand out to greet you. And somebody sent me one yesterday exactly like our poster, except that the guy reaching his hand out behind the dark glasses was Mr. Orange Hair.
Huh.
And he had a big long red tie in the front with a T at the bottom of it. and the top of the billboard, it said, "Space Force, join now."
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. It really is, and somebody sent me a video clip online to a parade last year in Madrid for Carnival. They celebrated like the Mardi Gras kind of thing.
Yeah.
This huge parade, and there are like 50 people dressed in visitor costumes marching down this street, and they've got two floats the size of Rose Parade floats that they've built to look like our spacecraft.
Wow.
And also, there's a phrase in French written on the bottom of the billboard. And when I translated it, I realized that what it said was, to the heroism of the resistance fighters, past, present, and future.
Wow.
This work is dedicated, and I thought,
amazing.
That's what I wrote at the beginning.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
It
was really one of the great homages I have ever had, and
it just lives on and on.
It's absolutely true. I get so much fan mail and emails from it, from all of the stuff that I've done, but everything else combined doesn't add up to the amount of email that I get about V, and a lot of it from educators who use it as a teaching aid in their classrooms, like you're talking about. And the most interesting thing is that more than half of the mail comes from females.
Really?
Which is really, but that's been the story of my whole career in speculative or science fiction. My demographics have always been, the largest segment of my audience is adult females, and then males, and then teens, and then kids. It's like the perfect demographic. Huh. But sci-fi is not usually thought of as female territory, and but I think that's part of the reason I've enjoyed the success that I have, because I've reached a broad audience, and I like writing for strong women characters also. But anyway, it's been fun.
Well, in that vein, I mean, talking about your other output, I mean, we can't talk about V without also talking about Alien Nation. Especially because you just told me you didn't want to be pigeonholed as the sci-fi guy, and yet...
Oh, right. You're right. And how did that happen, right? Yeah, because, a friend of mine, an old dear friend of mine named Harris Cattleman was in 89, was running Fox TV, and he called me and he said, "Kenny, we've got a movie that just was out. I don't know if you even saw it. It didn't do very well in the box office, but we think that it's got some potential as a series, and I'd really like you to take a look at it." And I said, "Sure, Harris, I'd be happy to." He said, "Well, it's called Alien Nation." And I said, "Thanks anyway, Harris, but no." And he said, "Oh, boy, kid, come on, just come over, just take a look, just So he was an old friend and had helped me in the past. So it's you always want to remember your pals. And so I went over to Fox, and I'm sitting in a screening room watching the original movie, which starred Jimmy Caan and Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah.
And it was really like Miami Vice with Coneheads.
That's exactly
I've
right.
always, I've always characterized it that way. That's how I felt it was. It was like they had this really interesting sort of premise, but I just couldn't get into it. It was basically just a buddy cop movie, but then there was one scene, Zaki, where Jimmy Caan's driving the car. He comes by to pick up his alien partner, George, and his alien cop friend gets in the car and waves to his family. And there's one shot of his point of view, one shot of his wife and two little alien kids standing on the porch of this hovel, and the bell went off in my head, and I thought, wait a minute. Who are they?
That's the show.
What's it like to be them? And
wow.
I went back to the Fox execs and I said, okay, you guys think you've got like Lethal Weapon with aliens, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, no. What you've got here is the opportunity to let me do a reworking of In the Heat of the Night. I said, let me do a piece that's about intolerance, about prejudice, about what it's like to be the world's newest minority. I said, that's something that we can really build on and really go to town with, and it has legs, as they say. There's a lot of ways to go, and because it's rampant. I mean, my God, it's I've gone back to Fox so many times since the show was on the air, saying, guys, we really ought to redo this because look at the world around you. My
Seriously,
God, the amount of hate crimes have gone up by 30%. I saw in the news yesterday, and anti-Semitism and white on black and black on white. I mean, all of that. It's just so, And the last time I went back at them, they said, well, we'd like to try to do that, except that Gail Ann Hurd, who produced the original movie, is trying to redo it as remake the original movie, the theatrical movie, and by the way, she's going to do it. They're talking about doing it much more personal, about the character relationships of the pair. I said, oh, really? Wonder where they got that idea. And if the right person gets a hold of it, it's of course it can be great. I mean, when I heard that they were going to remake the Bionic Woman, my first reaction is, oh, great. But then I heard David Icke was going to do it. Now, I don't know David personally, but I knew that he had done a pretty good job, I had heard, with remaking Battlestar Galactica. So
That's
that
right.
It was really better than the previous one. Then when I saw the pilot for the Bionic Woman, I said, oh my God. And it's funny because Peter Roth, I was in his office, he was president of Warner's when it was coming out. It wasn't his show, but he'd been watching the news about it, and he said, Kenny, it's going to be this huge hit. The tracking numbers are enormous there. I said, have you seen the pilot, Peter? He said, no, I haven't seen it, but I haven't seen the pilot, but it doesn't matter. It's great. It's going to be great. It's the highest tracking thing in the history. It's going to be the biggest hit in the history of Western civilization. And I said, Peter, have you seen the pilot? And he said, no, but it doesn't. I said, Peter, I've seen the pilot. It doesn't work, and it's going to crash and burn. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, because it certainly you can't remake it exactly like what our original Bionic Woman looked like, but people will come to it looking for those feelings that they got from watching the original show.
Yeah.
And the problem with the new one is that it has no humanity. It has no heart. It has no humor, and it certainly does not have an actress with the capabilities and the talents of Lindsay Wagner.
Right.
And sure enough, it opened. The first weekend got very big numbers, a big rating, I think about 15 million, which is a lot nowadays. We had 3 or 4 times that when we were doing it before. But the second week, it dropped off by 30%. And the third week, it dropped off another 30%.
Yeah.
And it crashed and burned, and it was gone in like 10 or 11 weeks. And to his credit, eternal credit as far as I'm concerned, I saw several interviews and reports where David Icke had stood up and said, we blew it. We never understood what the show was about. It didn't have the right heart or humanity or humor. It was like it was like dead on.
It was a name, and that was it. That's all they took.
That's it. Well, that's what they think they can do, you know. And
I mean, to me, the mission statement of the series, if I'm going to sum it up, when I think of Gary Graham telling these protesters, she belongs here.
Right, I know. One of my favorite moments.
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, but then going back to his home, his apartment, and going, "Oh, great! Why my building?"
Right.
You know, in the very next scene, he's going back and he sees a big, good-looking chick, and then he realizes, "Oh shit, she's one of them. Why my building? Why my building?" You know, I don't mind being a hero, you know, for the kid, but not in my backyard.
Yeah,
you know, it's what so many people feel, and that was to all of us. I mean, V is the project of which I am absolutely the most proud because. First of all, it was not an adaptation of anything. It came entirely out of my little pea brain. But Alien Nation was the show on which we had the most fun I have ever had on anything. And because, first of all, I assembled a cast of great players, many of whom I'd worked with before, and everybody loved everybody. It was like a rep company, the best kind of repertory company. And I had I brought along with me several of protégés of mine that had worked with me on other shows, like Andy Schneider and Diane Froloff, who had been involved with Bionic Woman and the Hulk and V with me, and who went on later on to do Northern Exposure and a whole bunch of other things, and just winning Emmys right and left. And we had a tremendous writing, producing team as well as a terrific cast, and there was no bullshit either. There was no. Mike Nichols had a sign in his office all the time that just said "No assholes," and I've always agreed with that philosophy, and and that's what it was like. It was just a dream kind of project that that nobody saw coming, and when we got it together. And it was such a shock when after the first season, and we opened Monday night for Fox. It was the first time they'd had a show on Monday nights, and the critics just went crazy for it. Zaki, I've done a lot of projects, but I have never done a project that never got a bad review, and except Alien Nation. There was never a bad review about Alien Nation. They all just embraced what we were trying to do and the metaphor that we were playing and the allegories that we're playing and the social consciousness that we were being able to raise because of the fact that we weren't offending anybody. It was, and yet we were talking about everybody, and we got awards from the Asian American community, the African American community, the LGBT community. Every minority felt that it was about them, and that's that was the best kind of thing you could get. And when and we did pretty well on Monday nights for them. We had another show leading us in called 21 Jump Street. I can't remember whatever happened to the lead guy in that, but
whatever happened
to that Johnny Depp guy. We're still trying to figure that out. As a matter of fact. But after one season, Barry Diller, in his infinite wisdom, who was running Fox at the time, canceled the show. I remember Peter Chernin calling me at the time and saying that Kenny, Peter was really trying to get it picked up again because we had done really, really well. And but he said Barry said he just feels like he can better numbers with if he puts comedies on Monday night. And I said, Peter, this is a huge mistake. And he said, I know. What can I tell you? It's Barry's choice. Nothing. Ba-dum-bum. Okay, so they put on their comedies. His comedies go so far in the toilet that they had nothing to put on the air, and they had to give Monday nights back to their affiliate stations because, and the next year at the Television Critics Association, Peter got up in front of them and said, last year, canceling Alien Nation was the biggest mistake we ever made. And so that afternoon, I was on the phone with him, going, "So, Peter, and it took me like 2 years of pounding until I finally got a call one day from somebody at Fox, and they said, "Hey, we've had a great idea." I said, "What's that?" "Why don't you do an Alien Nation TV movie to pick up where you left off and see how it goes?" And I said, "What a brilliant idea! My God, I love you guys." So we jumped at it, and it was, of course, the highest-rated TV movie that Fox had ever produced, and so naturally they were inspired. Zaki, Hollywood.
Of course.
You want to you like that bite of ice cream? Here's a half gallon. And but they ended up picking up 4 more Alien Nation movies, which was terrific because we all got back together, the whole cast, the whole crew, everybody wanted to be back together, and because there was not an ongoing series where I had to be executive producer, and I was still executive producer, but I didn't have to worry about trying to do 22 hours of episodes. I had time to direct them all, which is what I really am mostly, and what I enjoy doing the most. And it was like a gift from the gods. And so we ended up doing between 1989 and 1997, 7 or 8 years of working together on that show. And God, we all loved it so much. As a matter of fact, on the DVD set of the movies, there's we would have usually every year or two we'd have a get together, a picnic, a reunion barbecue,
Yeah.
And I was listening to the kids, the actors talking about their experiences on it, and then at the same time on one of the occasions, and a few weeks later, I was putting together the DVD stuff for the movie set. And I called them all up and I said, "Hey, will you come back and just sit in the living room and let me roll, 4 cameras on you and reminisce?" And I got them to tell the stories. And there's a wonderful special feature on the DVD set. It's just called A Family Gathering, where they all come back. We had some lunch, and then I sat them down in the living room and said, "Okay, tell me about the show." And
Wow.
And it's about a half-hour piece, and it's really, really great.
Well, and to be honest, the message of both V and Alienation is it is meaningful and eternal in both of those shows. So
it's so rewarding to hear that from you and from many other people who have talked about those same things and those same qualities and the thought-provoking qualities that V particularly had with the both of them really, but V really triggered it, and it's just it's a philosophy of humanism, of tolerance. I was raised in a virulently bigoted, anti-Semitic household as an only child, and I've always sort of wondered how I dodged that bullet, because Oscar Hammerstein wrote in South Pacific, one of my favorite songs in all-time musicals is how you've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught, and that's what I heard. And I was born in Arkansas and grew up near Washington D.C., so I saw sort of two sides of of America, and somehow the anti-Semitism and the bigotry that I heard nightly in my house growing up, it just never stuck. And I had Jewish friends who were in school with me, and they were just like me. What was the big deal, And my parents would sort of nod knowingly and smile and say, "Well, you'll find out when you get older," that kind of thing. And it was like, no. But I'm glad it stuck with you, and I'm really pleased that you had that reaction to my work.
This is one of those pinch me moments that has been something that I've been extremely grateful for. But before I let you go, my partner who hosts my other show with me, Brian Hall, who's a TV writer, he adores Short Circuit 2. That very specifically, Short Circuit 2 is a movie that is just near and dear to his heart. And I was wondering if you could share even one very small story about what it was like to pick up that film and carry on the chronicles of Johnny Five.
Yeah, there are so many actually wonderful pieces about it. I think that the main thing when up until that time it was my first feature also, and when I shot movies like the Alien Nation pilot and things like that, and TV movies, generally you're lucky if you get 24, 25 days to film, and so I'm used to working pretty fast and getting the quality that I need. And when I saw the first production board for they put together for me for Short Circuit 2, it was in 75 days. Okay, now I'm reading the script, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I know there's some robot stuff we got to do and all that, but 75 seems like I could probably do this picture in about 45 at the most, you know? And so I said, maybe I better sit down with John Badham, who had directed the first one, and so I took him to lunch at the Warner's commissary, and I said, John, I have a question. I said, they gave me 75-day shooting schedule, and he sort of looked at me strangely, and he said, they gave you 75 days? And I said, yeah. I mean, isn't that crazy? And he said, yeah, it is. He said, I had over 100 days on the first picture. You know, I said, whoa, wait a minute. What do you know that I don't know? And he said, well, I'll tell you, it's really simple, Kenny. Think about it. You've got a robot that can do 60 different things. Now, what that really means is there are 60 things that can go wrong. You know, and it's true. It was always the one cable, the one wire, the one servo, the one thing that you needed right at that particular moment. And we used every single one of the 75 days. But the other problem was, John explained to me that it took 17 or 18 guys to run the robot. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, there was one guy that did the right elbow, another guy that did the left elbow, because it's all radio controlled. So he was telemetrically controlled, but each joint had a different person doing it. A shoulder guy on the right, a shoulder guy. You know, they were like, it was crazy. And so I was driving over to meet Eric Allard, who had built Johnny 5 for the original movie, and I'm thinking there's got to be an easier way. And when I sat down, first got there to Eric's shop, I said, look, why couldn't we make like an telemetric suit, like a little where somebody could put on an armature that goes down or around their shoulder and down their arm, so that when they bend their right elbow, the right elbow of the robot bends. And
nice.
And he got the, and same with the wrist and same with the shoulder. And Eric got this peculiar smile. I said, let me take you into the shop and show you what we're working on. And that's exactly what they were working on. And it was the first time anybody had built anything like this. And by the time we were finished, one of the puppeteers could put on this it was like an exoskeleton kind of thing, you know. And he had both elbows. He had shoulders up and also shoulders out rotation. He had wrist rotation, wrist tilt, and also fingers that he could pick up things with. We even made a little stool that he could sit on, so that when he leaned forward, the robot would bend forward, and we got it from 17 people down to 4. You know, there was one guy who was actually a special effects guy who drove the chassis, and then I needed a team of 3 puppeteers. One would wear the telemetric suit, another one would do the head gross movements of the head, and also did the voice for us on the set, and then the third puppeteer did the bells and whistles, like the irises of his eyes and the eyebrows and that sort of thing. And you know, so I needed puppeteers, and I went to, of course, who do you go to when you need puppeteers? I sat down with Jim Henson in New York and told him what we were looking for and trying to get, and he put me together with Rob, Gord, and Trish, who were 3 puppeteers who worked as a team and they had worked for Jim on a couple of things, and they were in Canada, and we ended up having to shoot in Canada because TriStar didn't want to spend the money to shoot it in New York like it had been planned for and like we were prepping for, because they didn't want to spend the extra $1 million. And I said, guys, Toronto's a nice city, but it's really vanilla, you know. But we were up there. But John, working with Rob, Gord, and Trish was an amazing experience, because I gave them a week of rehearsal with just themselves by themselves, working with Johnny to see how he worked and to figure him out, you know, and how they would do it. And then we brought the actors in to start working with them. So there was a good, you know, full couple of weeks of rehearsal. But Rob, Gord, and Trish were so telepathically connected. It was amazing, Zaki. And you can tell Brian that I could walk on the set, and Johnny would be sort of sitting to one side, and I'd say, Johnny, you know any songs? And he would suddenly stand up and start singing over the somewhere over the rainbow, and his hands and his arms and his eye, and it's all moving like a living creature. And it was just extraordinary, the way that the three puppeteers breathed the life into Johnny. And there was one very interesting thing at the end of when you finish, you work on a picture for 75 days with people, you make a lot of friends, and you stay in touch over the years, and life goes on, But as soon as we wrapped with Short Circuit 2, it was like Johnny had died. Because he wasn't there anymore,
Wow.
Johnny was the combination of all of their talents, and it was really like I had lost a young friend in an auto accident or something, and I really found myself going through a period of mourning about it, because he was such a delightful character, and the puppeteers were so good that they could ad lib. It was just amazing, the stuff that came out of them while we were doing it. And there was also one day when it was raining. What a surprise, in Toronto.
Of course.
And we were setting up in the street to do something, and we looked around, and Johnny was running off down the street because he had literally short-circuited, and he was running off on his own, and the special effects guys were chasing him down the street between cars, and it was like, okay, so this really could happen. But that was the other thing that I tried to do, and I show this in my film seminar that I teach down here I've done it at UCLA and USC and all over the country, as well as in England and Moscow too. But and currently at the New York Film Academy here. But one of the things I talked to them about was why, when Jeff Sagansky, the guy who suggested Aliens in Brandon's office
Sure.
all those years ago, was then running TriStar. He's the one that sent me the script for Short Circuit, and I said, I don't know, Jeff, I don't really want my first movie to have a number at the end of it, and but and also the script, and I just kept sort of saying no, and Jeff said, no, wait a minute, what's really wrong? I said, well, I'll tell you what it is. In the script, it's very sweet and it's funny, and there's a lot of great sight gags and all of that, but you're using your leading man to do jokes off of, as opposed to realizing what you've really got here. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, what this really is the Elephant Man. And he said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's a movie about a funny little robot. And I said, I know, but he's like the Elephant Man, where you can't see through the surface of him. He has to say, I am a man. There's this pure soul burning inside of him that you can't get past and see. And he's a stereotype of ugly. And when people look at a robot, it's the same thing. They can't. I said, let me dig deeper into the script and really mine all of the stuff that has to do with stereotyping, and it's a precursor to alienation. I mean, you can see what I'm doing, because people see somebody with skin that's different from theirs, or eyes that are shaped different from theirs, or a face that looks like a robot. Well, it couldn't possibly be alive, And I said, let me mine that with the writers if they're game to do that, and I don't care about the writing credit; they can keep the credit, but let's just make it be deeper and more emotional and more full of genuine pathos, and that's what we did. And I think that's part of the reason that the movie was so successful, because I said I'm not going to lose any of the humor, Jeff, or the sight gags and all the great jokes and gags we can do, but we'll have audiences crying with us as well as laughing with us if we go this route. And so that's what we did. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest days for everybody on the set was the day we had to beat up Johnny, and where he was getting just the shit beaten out of him. And it was really painful. All of us were just sort of flinching and grimacing all the way through the filming of it, and I had to edit it very carefully so that it wouldn't just destroy all the little children that were watching the picture too. And it was a tough day, but then again, Johnny survived, came back, and ended up in his gold C-3PO trim, and before there was I guess it was not before there was a C-3PO, but it was fun, and and it was a good time. We had a good crew. We were I was using Norman Jewison's crew up in Canada, who were pretty good. They were not quite as good as my Hollywood crew, but I did manage to bring my great cinematographer John McPherson, who had shot all of the Hulk and V and Alien Nation for me, later on Alien Nation, and so it looked good, and it's still a movie that I'm really proud of. It plays really well, and audiences, and it was a treat to be among the audience, watching them, get into the joy of the thing.
Well, like I said, among those audiences was 7-year-old Brian Hall, who launched on his way into a career in Hollywood.
That's great.
It's very funny because this is Brian is one of my closest friends, and he judiciously drops Johnny Five references constantly.
Okay.
And I know very specifically his it's the second film that he loves, and so it's very Johnny Five, that's a deep cut, and so I love that he's keeping the candle lit because I think that says something about a little movie about a little robot can have a big impact.
Well, it's true, and I gotta say, reaching around to pat myself on the back as far as I can, one of the reviewers from one of the major papers, Philadelphia Inquirer, or it might have been the New York Daily News. In the review, they said that this is the best movie sequel since, well, let's face it, since Godfather Part 2. And I said, okay, I'll take that. It's like, wow, yeah, okay, because it's usually the sequels are not equal to what they should have been, other than Jim Cameron's Aliens, which I thought was really brilliant. To get a review like that from a major paper, on a sequel movie, it's
not too shabby.
There is a cinema god, like that. So, but
well, yeah. And before I cut you loose, please let my audience know what your website is and where they can reach out to you.
Oh, sure. My website is just www.KennethJohnson, one word, .us. www.KennethJohnson.us. And there's also a Facebook page. It's Kenneth Johnson Author, because it was I started that when I had my novels coming out a couple of years ago. I was lucky enough to have the first one became a big Amazon bestseller, and the second is also doing pretty well, and also has echoes of the first novel has sort of echoes of the Incredible Hulk in it, in terms of the hero having brought down the curse upon himself and having to deal with it. It's the publisher always thought of it as the Da Vinci Code meets Forrest Gump, which sounds a little goofy, but it's about this guy who has lived a very, very long time and has had an enormous impact on our entire history for the last 2,000 years. And
nice.
And the second book, The Darwin Variant, is about an extraterrestrial virus that is brought to Earth on shards of a comet, which has the ability to it speeds up the evolution of whatever organism it gets into, and so if it gets into plants, suddenly they're growing better, faster, stronger, sweeter fruit, and all of that. But they're squashing out all the plants that aren't infected. So it's about survival of the fittest. And when it gets into humans, you can see where it goes. And there are a lot of echoes of V in the Darwin variant, but you can see all about it at the either of the two sites.
Yeah, I hope people will check those out. And Mr. Johnson, again, such a thrill, and I appreciate you taking the time. And I hope, as you said, I hope you'll be able to join us again with some good news about a brand new V.
That would be great, Zaki. I look forward to it. And please say hi to Brian Hall for me, and thank him for liking my little guy.
I absolutely will do that. Thank you, sir.
Okay, you bet. Take care.
Bye-bye. All righty. Once again, big thanks to Kenneth Johnson for taking the time to talk to me. This was, you could tell just from listening to me how thrilled I was to have this opportunity. In addition to this interview, much of the material from this conversation made its way into a feature piece that I wrote for IGN a couple years back, chronicling the history of V, which if you jump over to IGN and check that out, I think you will enjoy that. That is a piece I'm very, very proud of, and I think it turned out fantastic. But hey, if you have any questions for me, you can email me at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. You got the Movie Film Podcast dropping new episodes every week. My goal is to have Nostalgia Theater fired back up to our usual monthly output. If you're looking for me on social media, you can find me at Zaki's Corner, that's Zakis Corner. You can also read my reviews at the San Francisco Chronicle, as well as IGN and The Wrap. And with that, thank you everybody for listening to Nostalgia Theater 2026. I will be back very soon.